I always imagined my wedding day would be full of light, something like the movies. Perfect lighting, everyone smiling, champagne flutes clinking like crystal wind chimes, and love pouring from every corner of the room. But standing in the middle of the lavish reception hall at the Belmont Country Estate, I felt watched. Not by cameras, not by guests, but by something unseen, something waiting for me to figure it out. I told myself I was just nervous. I had just married into the Covington family. Yes, those Covingtons. Wealthy, poised, powerful. My husband, Nathan Covington, was every girl's dream. Handsome, brilliant, mysteriously charming, and heir to one of the most old-money families in all of Charleston. At least, that's what I thought. My name is Rachel Lawson. I'm a 29-year-old elementary school teacher from Savannah, Georgia, raised by a single mom. No family estates, no trust funds, just a belief in love, hard work, and doing what's right. And somehow, I ended up here, wearing a $15,000 gown, posing in front of a rented Rolls-Royce, while Nathan's mother, Diane Covington, kept whispering to the photographer, "Get the emerald brooch in the frame. It's vintage Van Cleef. It needs to be obvious." That brooch was the first lie. I didn't know it at the time, of course. At that moment, I was still pretending along with them, believing the shine, the smiles, the subtle boasts about old money. I didn't even blink when Diane called the wine a special shipment from Bordeaux, or when she said their butler was traveling in Europe for the season. But something didn't add up. For one, no one seemed to actually work. Nathan told me he was an entrepreneur. He flipped companies. When I asked him what that meant, he'd laugh and say, "It's complicated, babe. Boring stuff." His father, Thomas Covington, was retired. But from what? No one ever said. They had a summer house in Florida, but we never went there. They had staff, but I never met anyone. They dressed impeccably, but I once saw Diane peel the price tag off her Louboutin heels. And they were from Ross. I brushed it all off. People have quirks, right? Until the night we moved into their mansion. Nathan said we'd stay there just for a few months, until our new place was ready. I was hesitant, but his family insisted. "You'll have the West Wing to yourselves," Diane said with a forced smile. "You'll barely know we're here." But the moment we pulled up to the estate in Nathan's leased Tesla, I felt that feeling again. Watched. I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe exhaustion. The house was huge. Columns like a southern plantation, vines crawling across the stone archways, windows tall enough to be church doors. But up close, it was crumbling. The shutters were flaking. One window had cardboard taped on the inside. And when Nathan unlocked the massive oak doors, they creaked so loud I jumped. Inside, the house was dark and cold, the kind of cold that lives in the walls, not the air. I remember walking down the hallway toward the West Wing, and something on the wall caught my eye. A painting, a large one. It showed a woman in a green dress, seated stiffly in front of an ivory piano. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes looked just like mine. "She's your grandmother?" I asked Nathan. He shrugged. "No clue. It came with the house." That was odd, but I let it go. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I thought it was just the new environment, the quiet, the darkness. But something kept bothering me. A low hum. Faint, like an engine idling far away. I nudged Nathan, but he was fast asleep. I got out of bed, tiptoed through the cold hallway, and followed the hum. It was coming from the dining room. I stood in the doorway, half afraid, half curious. There was Diane, in her bathrobe, seated at the head of the long, glossy table. No lights on, no food, just her, whispering something to herself while gently stroking the emerald brooch. I watched her for a few seconds, heart pounding. Then she stopped and looked directly at me. No surprise on her face. No embarrassment. Just a cold, vacant smile. "Go back to bed, Rachel," she said softly. "This house gets colder if you wander." I didn't respond. I just backed away and locked our bedroom door. The next morning, everything was back to normal. Diane chirped about the day's menu. Thomas was in the den reading the Wall Street Journal, as usual. Nathan was already on his phone, talking about a new deal he was finalizing. No one mentioned the night before. And the dining room? Spotless. Empty. I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. So, I began observing. The next week, I took notice of the details, the cracks in the marble flooring, the dust on the chandeliers, the way the lights flickered any time too many appliances were on. I asked Diane if I could do laundry. "Oh," she said quickly, "the washer's acting up. We usually send it out." Strange. Later that day, I found a pile of clothes, wet and wrinkled, hidden in the back sunroom. Like someone tried to hand wash them and then forgot. Nathan's shirts, Diane's scarves, Thomas's boxers. So much for sending it out. That night, I confronted Nathan. "Why do you guys pretend you have staff when you don't?" I asked. He laughed. "Babe, you're overthinking it. My parents are private. That's all. And they don't trust just anyone in the house." "Then why lie about it?" I pressed. He kissed my forehead and said, "Because people like stories, Rachel. They respect image. Especially in this town." But I wasn't satisfied. A week later, while everyone was out at a charity luncheon, I stayed back claiming I had a headache. The moment the last car pulled out, I started searching. First, the kitchen. I opened every cabinet, every drawer. The fridge was almost empty, just condiments and 2 cartons of almond milk. The pantry, filled with expired boxes of pasta and cereal. A few cans of beans. A bag of flour that smelled like mildew. Then I checked the wine cellar. I had never been allowed down there. Diane always said, "Too damp, darling. Bad for your hair." But that day, I found a key in her jewelry box. The cellar was nothing but a dusty storage room with cheap bottles. Some even had grocery store price stickers still attached. I sat on the floor, surrounded by lies, and I cried. Not because they were poor, but because they lied, and they didn't even trust me enough to tell me the truth. I felt betrayed, used, a prop in their illusion. But still, I didn't leave. I told myself maybe they had their reasons. Maybe they used to be wealthy and couldn't let go. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they needed time. So I waited. But then came the credit card statement. I wasn't supposed to see it. But Nathan had left it on the kitchen counter. I saw my name. I saw charges I hadn't made. A $2,300 charge to a jewelry store in Miami. $4,800 to a luxury boutique in LA. $9,000 for a hotel in Vegas. All under Mrs. Rachel Covington. My blood ran cold. I confronted Nathan, shaking. "Why is my name on these?" I demanded. He stared at me, silent. Then finally said, "Because it looks better that way. Women get more grace with debt collectors. That's just how it works." I was stunned. "You're using my name for your family's fraud?" He looked away. "I'll fix it," he said. "I promise." But I knew then something much bigger was going on. And I was part of it now. Trapped in a beautiful lie. And it was only the beginning. The following days were filled with strange tension I couldn't explain. From the outside, everything still looked perfect. Diane still wore her diamonds. Richard still drove his imported luxury car. And their house still glittered with chandeliers and glass figurines. But now that I had begun to notice the cracks, I couldn't unsee them. I started paying attention to the details. One afternoon, I offered to help Diane set the table for dinner. When I opened the drawer to grab some silverware, I noticed the utensils were mismatched. Some of them had scratches and fading gold trim, while others were clearly different brands. "Oh, don't worry about those," she said too quickly, her hand snatching the drawer shut. "We usually have everything set already, but the cleaner's been late all week." I smiled politely but tucked that moment away. Later that night, I found Richard standing outside by the garage, smoking a cigarette, pacing nervously. I hadn't even known he smoked. When he saw me, he quickly dropped the cigarette and crushed it beneath his loafer. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, looking away. "Stress at work. That's all." But his eyes didn't match his words. Something was off. And it wasn't just small household inconsistencies anymore. It was their energy. They were nervous, guarded. And then there was Noah. My husband had always been loving, but since we moved in with his parents, he'd grown distant. Stressed. Snappy. "Why are you always snooping around?" he asked me one morning as I walked back from the basement laundry room. "I'm just trying to help," I said, stunned by his tone. He ran a hand through his hair. "Well, don't. You don't need to be in every corner of the house." That was the second time I'd been told not to look around too much. The first was Diane. The third time was even stranger. It was a Thursday. I was in the sitting room reading when the front door opened. A man in overalls walked in, startled to see me. "I'm here to check the boiler," he said, confused. "Did they move already?" "Move?" I asked, lowering my book. He blinked. "The Mitchells? The owners? I thought they sold this place." "That's what my work order says." I stared at him. "No, they still live here." The man looked uncomfortable. "Strange. Sorry for the confusion." He turned and left quickly, leaving behind a tension I could almost taste. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep and crept down to the basement. My heart thudded in my chest as I descended the creaky wooden steps. The basement was huge, with storage boxes, furniture covered in white sheets, and 2 large safes. I hadn't dared open them before, but something was pulling me now. I reached for one of the sheets, slowly peeling it back. What I found left me frozen. Underneath wasn't just an old armchair or box of decorations. It was a stack of unpaid bills hidden under a wooden crate. Dozens of them. Medical bills, mortgage late notices, credit card statements. All in Diane and Richard's names. And then I found something worse. 2 letters from the bank. Foreclosure warnings. My breath hitched. I grabbed a few envelopes, stuffed them into my sweater pocket, and quietly climbed back up. Noah was already in bed when I returned, scrolling through his phone. "You were gone a while," he said, barely looking up. I hesitated. "Just needed water." He nodded, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I confronted Diane casually. I couldn't come out with it all at once. I had to see how much she'd admit. "So, how's everything with the house?" I asked over breakfast. She smiled too broadly. "Lovely. We're planning to renovate the upstairs soon. Maybe get a pool." That was a lie. There was no money. Not even enough to cover the electricity bill. And just then, as if fate wanted to confirm my suspicions, the lights flickered. Diane froze, her smile twitching. "Old wiring," she said quickly. "We're upgrading soon." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. By the end of the week, everything unraveled further. I followed Richard one afternoon when he left in his luxury car, curious about his meetings. I stayed several cars behind, careful not to be seen. He didn't go to an office. He drove to a pawn shop. I watched from across the street as he exited with a watch in his hand. A Rolex, one I'd seen him wear a few days ago. He walked inside, and when he came out 20 minutes later, his wrist was bare and his face was pale. He was selling their things, piece by piece. When I got home, I couldn't hide my feelings. No one noticed immediately. "You've been acting weird," he said, his voice low. I stared at him. "Noah, your parents. Are we in financial trouble?" His eyes flared. "What?" "I found the foreclosure letters. The bills. Richard's pawning his belongings." He stood up. "You were snooping?" "Emily, that's not your place." "My place?" I snapped. "I'm your wife. This is my place, and I deserve to know what's going on." He looked shaken. "It's complicated." I crossed my arms. "Make it simple." He sat down, buried his head in his hands. "They're broke, okay? They've been broke for years. But they wanted to keep up appearances. They said people would stop respecting them if anyone found out." I was silent, absorbing every word. "They lied to you," I said softly. "They lied to everyone," he replied. Suddenly, the grandeur of the mansion felt suffocating. The marble floors, the velvet curtains, it was all a performance. A performance I was now a part of. But I wasn't going to play along anymore. That night, I told Noah I wanted to leave. At least for a while. He looked wounded. "We're family. You can't just walk away from that." But I could. And maybe I had to. Not because they were broke, but because they manipulated me into believing a life that didn't exist. A few days later, I packed a bag and left the house. But before I closed the door behind me, Diane stopped me at the front steps. Her eyes were hollow. "You think you're better than us because you found some papers?" she hissed. "You have no idea what it's like to lose everything and pretend like you're fine." I didn't reply. I just walked to my car. And then she said something that chilled me to the bone. "You think you've uncovered our secrets. But sweetheart, you don't even know the half of it." I couldn't sleep. The ticking of the antique clock in the guest bedroom felt louder than ever, echoing through the hollow air like a countdown. To what, I wasn't sure, but I knew something was coming. By now, I had stopped believing in coincidences. That night, I sat up in bed, clutching my phone. I stared at the blurry photo I'd taken earlier that day, the back of a checkbook I'd seen carelessly left on the kitchen counter. The name written on it wasn't Robert Stone, my father-in-law's name. It said Daniel Mercer. Why was someone using a different name? I zoomed in and saw an address in a part of town that didn't match the upscale neighborhood we were in. My gut clenched. I decided to search it. It was a low-income housing complex. My mouth went dry. Had I been lied to about everything? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the growing list of red flags anymore. The locked rooms. The awkward tension when anyone mentioned money. The elaborate stories that never added up. The driver who mysteriously quit. The one time I asked my mother-in-law about the house's history, and she completely changed the subject. And now, different names, fake addresses? I felt like a character in someone else's elaborate play. A stage wife, dressed in borrowed clothes, performing inside a crumbling set. The next morning, I pretended everything was fine. "Morning, sweetheart," said Olivia, my mother-in-law, with her always rehearsed smile. She handed me a smoothie in a glass rimmed with mint. "Thank you," I whispered, watching her closely. She was wearing a satin robe, but I noticed a frayed seam on the sleeve. Something I hadn't seen before. And her watch, a supposed Cartier, had a slight chip on the dial that looked wrong. That's when it all snapped together in my head. They were pretending. They weren't rich. They were pretending to be wealthy. I needed proof. That afternoon, while everyone was out, I went into the one place that had remained locked since I arrived, the study. I had noticed that the key was attached to the decorative book charm Olivia always wore around her neck. I had seen her toss it in her drawer a day earlier, so when I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I made my move. My fingers trembled as I turned the key. The door opened with a creak. Inside, it wasn't what I expected. No mahogany bookshelves. No antique globe. No family heirlooms. Just a folding table, a broken printer, some old laptops, and stacks of manila envelopes. In the corner sat a corkboard pinned with overdue bills, fake property listings, printed screenshots of luxury interior photos from Zillow. They were faking everything. Every bit of the wealth, the stories, the assets, the name, it was borrowed or fabricated. I sat there in the dusty chair, heart pounding. Why? Why go to all this trouble? What do they get out of this, and why target me? I thought back to my wedding. How rushed it had been. How they'd insisted on keeping it small, classy, and intimate, they said. No extended family. No real friends. No photographers beyond the ones they hired. What if it wasn't about me at all? What if it was my family's money they were after? I called my mom. "Hi, baby," she said cheerfully. "How's married life treating you?" "Mom, has Dad made any large financial commitments recently?" She paused. "What?" "No, why?" I held my breath. "No new investments? Loans?" She sighed. "Well, Robert did pitch your father on something a couple of weeks ago. Some luxury development opportunity, I think." I felt like the floor disappeared under me. "Did he invest?" I think so." "Why? What's going on?" I could barely speak. "I think I'm married into a con," I whispered. I was still sitting in the study when Ethan came home. "Babe," he called. I didn't answer. When he finally walked in, he saw the door to the study wide open. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, eyes darting toward the desk. I turned slowly to face him. "Who's Daniel Mercer?" I asked. He froze. I saw his throat move as he swallowed. "Where did you hear that name?" "It's on the checkbook. The one your dad left on the counter. The one with the address that doesn't match anything you told me." He tried to laugh, to shrug it off, but it came out wrong. "Look, there's an explanation." "There better be," I said, because right now all I see is lies. His eyes softened. He stepped toward me. "Okay, yes. We're not who we said we are. Not exactly. But it's not what you think." "Then explain," I said, voice trembling. "My parents used to be wealthy. Years ago. But they lost everything after the recession. We kept the image up because they thought it would help me land someone with stability. Someone like you." I stared at him. "So you tricked me? You manipulated me into marrying you?" "No. I love you. I really do. But my parents, they thought it was the only way to get our family back on its feet. They didn't expect to actually like you. And I didn't expect to fall this hard. The worst part? I believed him, and it made everything worse. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. This wasn't just a lie. It was an entire identity fabricated to manipulate my life, my marriage, and possibly my family's money. I didn't know what was real anymore. Did Ethan actually love me? Was he a victim in this, or a player? And if I exposed them, what would happen to me? To my parents? I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment since the day I met his family. Every compliment, every promise, every luxurious weekend getaway. It all blurred into one long, orchestrated con. I felt sick, but I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. I needed to decide my next move, quietly, carefully, and with every ounce of strength I had left. And I knew one thing. I wouldn't let them ruin my family the way they had ruined their own. It was a Friday night, and the entire house was quiet, too quiet. For a mansion that always buzzed with phony grandeur, tonight felt stripped of any illusion. The fake laughter, the perfectly timed dinner parties, the neighbors' admiration, it all evaporated under the weight of what I had uncovered. I was standing in the marble-floored foyer, the soft ticking of the grandfather clock the only sound in the room. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I had the documents in my hand, the mortgage default notice, the forged business licenses, the unpaid property taxes. All of it. They'd lied to everyone. They'd lied to me. I had never planned to confront them like this. I imagined it would be with my husband beside me, with measured words and calm reasoning. But tonight I was a storm, and storms don't knock politely. They break the door down. Diane, I called, my voice echoing up the staircase. We need to talk. Now. There was a shuffling noise above. Then silence. I stepped forward. Don't pretend you didn't hear me. I shouted, louder this time. No more lies. No more games. I know everything. Diane, the woman who'd insisted I call her mother within days of marrying her son, appeared at the top of the stairs. Her silk robe was carelessly tied, and her hair wasn't in its usual perfect blowout. She looked tired. Everything about what, dear? She asked with a slight smile, the same sugary tone she used to manipulate people at church fundraisers. I held up the papers. This, all of this. The bankruptcy filings, the fake jewelry, the staff that are really paid actors for events. You've been living a lie and dragging my husband into it. Her eyes flickered to the documents. For a second, the mask cracked. She descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Where did you find those? Under the false bottom in your closet safe, I replied. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the truth. Diane sighed. You don't understand. You're too young to understand what it takes to hold up an image like this. An image? Diane, this isn't about image anymore. You've bankrupted yourselves for status. You've used my marriage to Caleb as a lifeline, hoping I'd never ask questions. But I did. And now, you owe me the truth. The living room door creaked open, and there stood Caleb, my husband, his face pale. He looked at his mother, then at me. You told her? He asked Diane, his voice dry and barely audible. No, I said. I found out myself. She's been lying to you too, Caleb. Or maybe you've known all along. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the fireplace, staring into it like it would offer a solution. I didn't want this, he muttered. I just wanted us to be okay, to live the life we were supposed to have. But that life was fake, Caleb, I said, stepping toward him. How long were you going to let them pretend? How long were you going to let them use me as their financial escape plan? Diane interjected. Don't act like you were some innocent bystander. You benefited from our lifestyle. The parties, the house, the name. I came into this family with love. I snapped. Not for your money or your so-called reputation. I love Caleb. I believed in him. But you? You taught him how to lie and call it grace. The room went still. Caleb finally turned to me. His eyes were wet. I didn't know how to tell you, he said quietly. I kept thinking I'd fix it somehow, that if we just kept up appearances a little longer. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but held it back. You let me think we were building something real. But all along, I was living in a mansion made of sand. Diane scoffed. So what now? You'll what? Expose us to the world? Write a blog post about how the perfect family was a fraud? No, I said, but I'll protect myself. And if that means the world finds out, then so be it. I reached into my bag, and pulled out a flash drive. Everything's backed up. Every document, every lie. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or suddenly go quiet, you better believe the truth won't die with me. Caleb looked genuinely afraid now. Not for himself, but for me. You think I let anything happen to you? He asked, stepping forward. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said. You broke that trust. You let your parents manipulate both of us. He opened his mouth, but then closed it, speechless. Diane sat down on the grand staircase, burying her face in her hands. The silence between us was louder than any argument. I'm leaving, I finally said. I'm taking back my power. You can keep your illusions, but I won't be part of them. You can't just walk out, Diane said, lifting her head. People will ask questions. They already are, I replied. And the answers are coming, whether you like it or not. I turned toward the front door, my heels clicking against the floor. My heart was racing, but I'd never felt more in control. Behind me, Caleb said softly, Do you still love me? I paused at the door. I love the man I thought you were, not the puppet they turned you into. I left without another word. I wish I could say the truth brought peace. That once everything unraveled and the masks came off, my world found stillness. But no, the silence that followed the confrontation was heavier than the lies that had lived before it. The morning after the fallout, I sat at the edge of the guest bed, now mine again temporarily, gripping the edge of the mattress as if grounding myself. My bags were packed, but my heart was scattered across a battlefield of betrayal. I had not only lost a family, I had lost trust. The version of my life I had clung to had shattered beyond recognition. I thought James would come after me. I left the door open, figuratively and literally. I even turned off airplane mode on my phone, hoping his name would flash across the screen. But he didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't knock. And maybe that hurt most of all. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. The late-night whispers between his parents, the fake bank account screenshots, the costume jewelry passed off as heirlooms, the mysterious locked room that turned out to be filled with thrift store purchases waiting for staging. The illusion was perfectly constructed, and I had walked through it like a blind woman in a museum of lies. But it was their silence after that screamed the truth. They never loved me. They loved what I could offer, a reputation boost, maybe connections through my career, someone gullible enough to believe their fantasy and not ask questions. I had been their trophy, and when I cracked the pedestal, they didn't try to glue it back together. They just threw it away. Back in my own apartment, I cried into pillows, not because I missed them, but because I missed the version of me that used to believe people meant what they said. 2 weeks passed before I heard from James. His name appeared in my inbox, not my phone. He didn't call. He emailed. Subject, I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't want to open it, but I did. I don't know what to say except I panicked. Everything fell apart so fast. I wasn't prepared for you to see the truth, and I wasn't strong enough to stand with you when the lies came crashing down. My parents lied to you, to me, to everyone, and I allowed it. I didn't know how to fix it, so I ran. I miss you, and I still love you. I stared at the message. Cold, pixelated apologies on a screen. No voice, no touch, no proof of change. Love? You don't love someone you let drown in a sea of lies. I replied with one sentence. You love the lie more than you ever loved me. And that was the last I ever heard from him. Months passed. I moved cities, started therapy, rebuilt my confidence brick by shattered brick. I didn't tell anyone the full story. Not because I was ashamed, but because I realized most people wear masks. And some of those masks are painted in gold. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a fool. I saw a survivor. One day, while sitting at a quiet corner cafe in Boston, I saw someone across the room who looked hauntingly familiar. A woman, well-dressed, expensive purse, sunglasses indoors, laughing too loudly, leaning into another woman's space as if to project power. It was James's mother, but it wasn't just her appearance that caught me. It was the fact that she was doing the same thing to someone else. Pretending, bragging about assets she didn't own, talking about country clubs she'd never visited, complimenting herself in ways that didn't match reality. I could see the pattern now, clear as crystal, and I could see the look on the other woman's face, the same look I wore once. Slightly unsure, but too polite to question. A little flattered, a little wary. I could have walked away. I could have stayed hidden, but I walked straight up to their table. "Mrs. Bishop," I said with a warm smile. Her jaw dropped. She didn't speak. I just wanted to say hello. It's been a while since her son and I parted ways. I hope he's well. The woman across from her looked curious now. And then, without another word, I turned and walked out. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I needed to remind myself who I was. That night, as I curled up in bed with a glass of wine and the soft hum of music in the background, I opened my journal. I wrote a single line. The people who lie about their wealth are the ones who fear having nothing more than the truth. And with that, I turned off the light. Or so I thought, because my phone lit up once more. A text this time. Unknown number. You weren't supposed to find out. But you did. Now you know who we really are. I stared at the screen, my breath catching. No name. No profile picture. Just the truth. Even after everything, they were still watching.